Judge's mockery of veterans' medals turned inspired when a general discovered the truth amazing. Jack Tanner tightened his grip on the wrench, the cold metal grounding him amidst a whirlwind of shame and anger. The community gathering had started as an evening of laughter, a rare moment of reprieve from the clanging chaos of his garage, but it quickly descended into humiliation. The local judge, a man whose contempt dripped from his practiced sarcasm, raised his voice, mocking Jack's Vietnam War medals as if they were merely tokens from a frivolous game. "What do you think that's worth, Tanner? A little shine on that rusting heart of yours?" The laughter felt like nails being driven in, each chuckle twisting deeper and deeper into Jack's soul. He stood frozen, grief and anger swirling within him. Memories of war surged, unbidden friends lost, screams reverberating through jungles, and the weight of survival he carried like a second skin. The medals, souvenirs of valor, sent waves of bitterness crashing through him. What did they mean in a town where the judge's words were as challenging as the combat he had faced? Jack's heart ached at the thought of Emily and Jake witnessing their father's disgrace, so he fought back the urge to confront the judge. He had to think of his kids. Before he could breathe, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A familiar voice called out Emily, breathless and frantic. "Dad, something happened at the game. Jake's hurt." Panic seized him as he imagined the worst. The pressure mounted like a coiled spring. Confronting the judge felt reckless now, a fool's endeavor. He was trapped in a life lived paycheck to paycheck, constantly pushed to the limit, where even the thought of speaking out made him queasy. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." The weight of expectation pressed down, and self-doubt twisted in his stomach. But amidst the tumult, he found a glimmer. A dusty box in the attic had beckoned him earlier. Inside lay family photographs, relics of a past he rarely touched. One caught his eye, a faded image of his grandfather standing proudly next to General Robert Caldwell, the local hero. The sight ignited a small flame. Was it possible that his family, too, was woven into a tapestry of bravery? Could this be a path to reclaiming what he had lost? As the memories emerged, they battled with Jack's present, the grief of his wife, the exhaustion of working late nights, and the relentless anxiety of his children's safety. Every moment was laced with tension. Would he reveal this newfound history, or would the shadow of the judge's mockery suffocate him? A slow, painful realization sunk in. He needed to confront his demons and fight for his dignity, for the sake of his children and his own soul. With the stakes rising, Jack steeled himself, knowing this was a crossroad unlike any he had faced before. Would courage embrace him, or would he retreat into the darkness? The stage loomed ahead, just out of reach, and he teetered on the edge of a decision that could change everything. Jack Tanner could feel the tendrils of shame trying to reclaim him even as he stepped away from the memories of his grandfather and back into the present. After hanging up with Emily, the urgent tone of her voice still echoed in his ears. He raced through the dilapidated home, taking the stairs two at a time, a storm brewing inside him. Jake was hurt, perhaps not seriously, but unsurety cast shadows on his hopes, as darkness had dimmed his once vibrant spirit. The garage, usually a sanctuary, felt foreign now. He fumbled with tools scattered about. The wrench felt like a relic of another life, one where he held power and purpose. However, the defensive walls he'd built around himself had begun to crack. Instead of retreating to familiar resentments about the judge and others who belittled him, he confronted this moment head-on. He needed to be strong for Jake, to show his son that despite the clamor of mockery, resilience was possible. The day had scrambled his intentions, and he found himself questioning everything once more. Was he meant to be a quiet, passive observer in his children's lives, or should he be a thunderous advocate, one who defended their peace with the ferocity of battle? The conflict inside him brewed, the cowardly fear of ridicule from the judge weighed against the inevitable challenge of being a father who stood up for his child. He gripped the wrench hard enough for his knuckles to turn white. His instincts screamed for action, yet his mind hesitated, teetering between fear and the desperate need to protect. With a series of resolving breaths, Jack was reminded of his grandfather's legacy. This wasn't just about him, about the judge or the tainted mockery, it was about setting a precedent for Jake and Emily. They needed courage from him more than ever, and perhaps, that courage could emerge from revisiting the past, the world molded by the strong man who stood next to a general. He decided to dive into the dim depths of his family history. His grandfather had fought against laughter and derision on foreign shores, drawing grapplings with soldiers and making choices that defined his character. Jack rummaged through the old box, his heart pounding with each layer of memory he peeled away. Snapshots emerged of camaraderie, badges of honor, boxed letters of heartfelt bravery. Taking a deep breath, he snapped a photo of his grandfather holding a medal, a steadfast glimmer against the backdrop of war. He couldn't ignore the message it conveyed. Jack realized that he had the potential to identify his own valor just as his grandfather had tasted his. That image would serve as a beacon, guiding him through the storm, giving him from within the strength to challenge not just the judge, but all the narratives that overshadowed his worth. Fueled now with purpose, the remnants of rage were cast aside. He stood taller, no longer suffocated by humiliation but invigorated by clarity. The path ahead was uncertain, yet a plan began to crystallize. He would face the judge, not just to defend himself, but to reclaim what had been lost: dignity for him and a model of bravery for his children. As dusk fell, shadows played over his garage, and Jack knew the time had come to act. No longer a specter of his past self, he stepped out with the photograph clutched tightly in his hand, ready to confront what lay ahead. Little did he know, the confrontation with the judge would unravel more than just his own story, it would forge a connection that might challenge the fate of his community. The conflict was imminent, but would he emerge as the man he was meant to be, or would remnants of his shame bind him still? As Jack stepped into the fresh air, determination coursed through him like adrenaline. The photograph still felt warm in his grip, a tangible connection to the courage he sought to embody. Each breath was deliberate, a reminder of the promise he made to himself and his children. Shadows danced around him, but instead of fear, he felt the exhilarating pulse of potential. He had decided not only to confront the judge, he would reveal a deeper truth about himself, unearthing the strength that lay beneath years of inadequacy. Each step toward the courthouse was laced with memories that flashed through his mind, not burdens but reminders of battles fought both in war and within himself. Arriving at the heavy wooden doors, he hesitated. The imposing structure represented everything he loathed, a fortress for the judge's scorn and condescension. But Jack understood now that this wasn't merely a place of judgment, it was an arena, an opportunity to reclaim agency over his narrative. Taking a steadying breath, he pushed through, the air inside thick with the weight of anticipation. The waiting area buzzed with murmurs from patrons and legal representatives. Jack scanned the room until his eyes landed on the judge, seated behind a massive desk, flipping through a stack of papers. Resentment simmered in the pit of his stomach at the sight of that man, who wielded authority like a weapon. His heart raced, but alongside the adrenaline surged a newfound clarity. He wouldn't allow the judge to define him. Jack approached the desk, each step a rebellion against years of sitting back and accepting his position as a victim. He forced a calmness into his voice as he announced himself. "Judge Collins," he began, a firm resolution behind the words. "We need to talk about my son and what will be done to defend him." The judge looked up, his expression a blend of surprise and mild amusement. "Mr. Tanner, I wasn't expecting you. What is it you think I can do about your Jake?" "Is more than a punchline," Jack interrupted, flames igniting within him. "He deserves respect and protection like any other child. I want you to understand what this is doing to him, what it does to our family." The judge's smile faded, replaced with a contemplative frown. Jack's words hung in the air, laden with the weight of vulnerability and frankness. He folded his arms and took a step closer, lowering his voice and masking the tremor of anxiety beneath the resolve. This isn't just about my son. It's about breaking a cycle of laughter at the expense of others, a cycle that I've allowed to persist. I have fought demons of my own, and I will not let my child become one. The judge's brow furrowed, perhaps for the first time sensing the resolve behind Jack's conviction. It was only a moment, but it felt like a breakthrough, a crack in the judge's armor. Jack felt emboldened, knowing he carried the memory of his grandfather alongside him, a powerful legacy that offered strength and courage. A flicker of realization crossed the judge's face, but before Jack could gauge its significance, a hesitation faltered his momentum. Would this truly shift anything, or was he merely grasping at straws? Had he gone too far, too quickly? Jack stood firm, battling the fear of the judgment that brewed behind those deep-set eyes. The silence stretched, stretching their connection and weighing the ramifications of this confrontation. Where there had once been doubt, a sense of possibility lingered. Perhaps this very moment held the power to redefine not just his son's experience but his own path. Before the judge could respond, unexpected footsteps echoed from the hallway behind them. A figure emerged, a woman dressed in military attire, sharper than the rest, commanding attention. Jack squinted, unable to process her appearance. "Judge Collins, we need to speak," she stated, her tone unwavering. "It's urgent." Jack's breath caught in his throat. Who was this woman, and what revelations awaited them? Did she offer a glimmer of hope, or would her presence complicate matters further? Jack braced himself, knowing that today's confrontation might unravel more than he had anticipated. The woman stepped closer, her posture radiating confidence that enveloped the room. Jack's attention shifted momentarily from the judge, whose expression had morphed into one of guarded curiosity, to this new presence. The military insignia on her uniform struck a chord, evoking memories of camaraderie and the weight of shared struggles. Who was she, and why did she command such immediate respect? "Excuse me?" The judge finally spoke, his tone a mix of irritation and curiosity. Jack felt a tension straining between them like a taut wire. His heart was now a drumbeat of anticipation, fueled by the hope this woman might be a catalyst for change. "I'm Captain Elaine Foster," she stated, locking eyes with the judge while allowing her gaze to flicker toward Jack, as if acknowledging his fight. "We need to discuss the recent incidents surrounding Mr. Tanner's son. It has come to my attention that the bullying is not merely traditional juvenile antics, this is a critical matter that could escalate." Judge Collins leaned back, slipping into a defensive posture as Captain Foster continued with an unyielding aura. "What is happening to Jake is part of a larger trend, a direct reflection of a culture that is eerily reminiscent of the patterns we've identified in military harassment cases. We cannot ignore how this affects the very fabric of our community as servicemen and women, we fight to protect our values." Jack's breath stilled. Her words were not just a call to action, they were a validation of his struggle, intertwining the warfare of childhood struggles and the greater societal battles he had faced. A sense of recognition filled the space as he realized the weight of his advocacy could stretch beyond the courthouse. He could rally allies, not just for Jake, but for others trapped in silence. The judge shifted uneasily, his authority challenged in a way Jack had not anticipated. "I appreciate your concern, Captain, but the matter is already under my advisement." "Your advisement?" Captain Foster interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "You know all too well the constraints of bureaucracy. We both do. This isn't about further paperwork or hearings, this is about a child, an American child who should not be afraid to go to school." Jack detected a slight twitch in the judge's jaw as Captain Foster's words sunk in. Perhaps he was seeing her as an equal, someone with the power to challenge his perspective. Jack felt energized, his fight against the system suddenly layered with the insight that he was not alone. "Your Honor," Jack ventured, suddenly emboldened by this unexpected alliance. "Everything I've said here today matters. This isn't a mere blip on a radar. It's a crisis, and if you want the community to believe in your judgments, you need to take a stand now. For Jake. For every kid who feels voiceless in the face of bullies. The silence in the room droned as Jack's words settled. Doubt weaved through his mind. Was this really turning the tide? Was he truly making an impact? Then, almost imperceptibly, he noted a shift in the judge's gaze. For a fleeting moment, the walls that had shaped his authority seemed to weaken. Jack was acutely aware of the risk in pressing further, but the perspective stirred within him a sudden flash of realization regarding his capacity to influence. Captain Foster, Judge Collins finally spoke, his tone softer. If I were to take your insights into account, it would mean accepting that this isn't merely a ploy for paperwork, but acknowledgement of a systemic issue that I've overlooked. This could be the beginning of something. Jack sensed the impending danger of that beginning, the myriad outcomes poised to branch out from this moment. Would they take the leap together? The air buzzed with potential but hung heavy with uncertainty. Suddenly, Captain Foster directed her attention back to Jack. Mr. Tanner, your resolve is commendable. But know this: it will only get harder from here. Despite this small victory, some truths will remain unchallenged unless we dig deeper. The words sliced through him. Jack understood, he needed more than courage. He required strategy, allies, and an intrepid heart to face whatever storm brewed ahead. It hit him then: the fight wasn't limited to the courthouse or even Jake's immediate situation. It was a fight for justice, acknowledgement, and dismantling the walls of apathy. As the judge considered the weight of her words, Jack felt a tremor of dread. What next? He thought. Jack dove deep, strategizing his next move as layers of revelation began to unfold, unsure how the chaos would echo in his family, his life. Captain, Jack began, his voice clearer than before, I need your support moving forward. Together. Count on me, she replied, her nod affirming the partnership, but the tension tightened once more. But what Jack didn't know was that a powerful presence lingered just beyond this crossroads, one that could either uplift him or deepen his struggles as he forged ahead. In the days that followed the courthouse encounter, Jack was engulfed by a sense of purpose tinged with anxiety. Captain Foster's words echoed relentlessly in his mind, reverberating against the backdrop of his daily life. He needed a plan, a structured approach rather than the chaotic mess of emotions tumbling within him. His first step was to arm himself with knowledge. Jack delved into research, exploring the nuances of anti-bullying legislation, community resources, and the psychological implications of childhood trauma. Every article, every study added a layer of depth to his understanding. He wasn't just a reactive parent anymore, he was becoming an advocate with a mission. He would not allow Jake's ordeal to become a mere statistic. This newfound clarity ignited something profound within him, an awareness that his voice mattered, that it held the potential to spark real change. But doubt still lingered, creeping through the cracks of his determination. What if he stumbled? Who was he to challenge established systems? A single parent grappling with his own pain and vulnerability. Each sleepless night brought another cycle of anguish. Would his son ever feel safe again? Could he truly navigate this battlefield of bureaucracy and indifference? With Captain Foster's encouragement ringing in his ears, Jack reached out to fellow parents in Jake's school. At first, his hands shook as he typed messages seeking shared experiences. Click. The send button absorbed a piece of his fear, and he found himself in unforeseen territory. Slowly, responses trickled in, stories of torment and resilience, a tapestry of shared struggles that erased the isolation he had felt for so long. Each interaction began to build a community of like-minded individuals who had also fought in silence. They began to gather in Jack's living room, sharing not just stories but strategies. They learned from each other's experiences, combining their voices into a louder, more organized outcry. Jack felt a rising tide deep within him. This was where connection blossomed into empowerment. However, as the group solidified, so too did the risk of confrontation with those who benefited from the status quo. The school administration, wary and defensive, recognized the shifting undercurrents among parents. They stepped up their resistance, dismissing Jack's advocacy as mere hysteria. That dismissive tone grated against Jack's growing conviction, but he knew he had to remain strategic. Utilizing insights gained from Captain Foster, he turned the tide of his approach, focusing on fostering dialogue rather than outright hostility. He began presenting his findings at parent-teacher meetings, not as an antagonist but as a concerned ally looking for collaborative solutions. By framing the narrative around community growth and safety, he slowly saw progress, though the walls of bureaucracy were still formidable. One evening, as Jack prepared documentation for the next meeting, he found himself reflecting deeply on the personal evolution he was undergoing. The impulsive father who had initially stormed into the courthouse had transformed into a calculating strategist, intent on crafting a future where fear had no domain in his son's life. But even as he built towards this hopeful future, he wrestled internally, fearing he may lose sight of why he began this fight in the first place. Was he honoring his son, or was he merely chasing after personal vindication? Would he risk his own well-being and Jake's by pushing too forcefully against an administration that preferred the peace of ignorance? As uncertainty clawed at him, he picked up the phone and dialed Captain Foster's number. Her steely resolve and keen insight would surely provide him much-needed guidance. "Elaine, I could use your advice. The pressure is building, and I sense we're standing on the precipice of confrontation," he admitted, confidence wavering as the words left his lips. It wasn't just a question of tactics anymore, he was about to face something much larger than himself. As she spoke, he felt the familiar spark of determination ignite anew, but he realized he was reaching for something deeper. "I need to know what happens when we challenge the very system that's designed to protect us." Just as she began to respond, a loud crash resonated outside his home. Jack's heart raced. The moment had arrived, a pivotal clash awaited him. The outcome was uncertain, but one truth stood bold in his heart: he was ready to fight. What awaited him outside would not only determine Jake's immediate future but could also unlock parts of himself he had yet to discover. Jack's heart thumped unevenly in his chest, emboldened by a sense of impending confrontation. The crash reverberated like a crack of thunder, awakening a fierce urgency. He threw open the door, bracing himself against the unknown. Outside, a gathering of parents stood in agitated clusters, their faces a mixture of anxiety and resolve. The confrontation was not just fabricating on the horizon, it loomed large, swallowing everything in its path. He felt an overwhelming swell of duty pulse through him. This was no longer just about Jake, the stakes were escalating to a communal crescendo. His focus sharpened, he had transformed from a solitary father into a vanguard for others. As he stepped into the throng, the weight of their shared suffering solidified within him. He was no longer afraid of anyone's judgment, he had become a voice for the voiceless. "I just got off the phone with Captain Foster," he asserted, raising his voice slightly to command attention. Silence swept over the group, eyes finding him amidst the tumult. "We can't let our doubts silence our purpose. If we want real change, it starts here, now." The murmurs shifted, uncertainty giving way to solidarity. Jack perceived the flicker of hope dance in their expressions. He summoned their collective stories, the torment etched in their children's faces, the powerlessness they felt within the school's echoing hallways. The stories weren't just theirs, they were his as well. "We need to prepare ourselves for what's to come," Jack continued, his voice firm, pulse racing with conviction. "The school won't like this. They'll do everything they can to dismiss us. We must stand united." As he spoke, a flicker of unease nudged at Jack's thoughts. What if they retaliated? Ignoring this anxiety quickly became an act of courage. He felt every heart present align with his, a shared rhythm of both fear and bravery. With their experiences interwoven, he began to plan. "Let us draft a letter together," he proposed, rallying their focus. One that highlights our demands as parents and holds the administration accountable. The room buzzed alive with agreement, voices mixing into a potent energy. He watched parents exchanging ideas, constructing sentences that transformed their anger into clear articulations of resolve. Jack felt himself energizing in response, shaping the collective voice they were forging together, a voice that would echo within the walls of the school. As they mapped their strategies, a mom named Sarah raised her hand, her expression careful. What happens if they just brush us off? We need to be prepared for that possibility. An undercurrent of doubt threaded through the group, and Jack's stomach knotted. If they refuse to listen, we take our case public. Social media, local news, we ensure people hear about this. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. He could feel his grip tighten on the new extent of his ambition, and he found himself unwilling to step back. This fight was becoming less about revenge, it was about justice. His mind sharpened with a burgeoning sense of responsibility, yet questions still loomed. Was he ready to face the backlash? What would it mean for Jake if he pushed too hard? Would he lose sight of his son's emotional needs in the chaos? These thoughts simmered momentarily before he was aware of the pivotal moment they were reaching. In a few days, they would confront the school board with their demands firmly laid out. The anxiety felt almost electric. This was the real test of his resolve. Jack's gaze swept across the assembly of parents. Each face echoed his own determination. What they were on the precipice of was not merely a meeting, it was a declaration meant to shake the status quo. Still, unease gnawed at him again as they wrapped up the meeting. As he watched everyone disperse, he asked himself, was he losing himself in the pursuit? Would chasing this cause blind him to Jake's needs? Fueled by conviction yet tangled in uncertainties, Jack nodded reassuringly to parents as they left. But with a sinking feeling of doubt, he picked up his phone again and dialed Captain Foster, hoping for guidance. Elaine, we need a strategy for when they dismiss us. And he hesitated, grasping for the right words. What happens when we find ourselves faced with retaliation? As Captain Foster's voice flowed over the line, Jack felt a tightening knot of tension forming in his chest. This battle was just beginning, and the level of confrontation was on the rise. Would he have the courage to face the consequences? Would Jake understand why he fought, or would the struggle overshadow their bond? The answers lingered just out of reach, shrouded in uncertainty, but there was one resolution he grasped resolutely. He was ready to find out. Jack stumbled back into his Stark apartment, the weight of the world pressing heavily on his shoulders. Each step felt like trudging through quicksand, pulling him down into a pit of anxiety as the specter of confrontation loomed closer. The walls, once a safe haven, now felt claustrophobic, closing in on him with whispered doubts and fear for Jake's well-being. He dropped his bag carelessly on the floor, the thud barely breaking the silence that filled the empty spaces. The phone call with Captain Foster had ignited a flame of determination but had also left him grappling with questions he couldn't silence. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration and confusion. The quiet of the room pressed around him, amplifying the turmoil that churned in his mind. Sitting at the kitchen table, he opened a notepad, but the page remained empty, mocking him. Jack needed clarity to transform the collective fears and aspirations of the parents into a coherent argument. They needed to articulate their pain and frustration non-violently yet powerfully. But how could he put their raw emotions into words? What if he misrepresented their struggles? His fear of failure began to spiral. As he stared at the blank page, he felt the familiar pressure in his chest rise. The letters seemed to mock him with their stillness, just like the voices in his head. You're not enough. What do you know about fighting a system? They echoed relentlessly. The silence felt like a test of his resolve, and at that moment, he questioned everything. Was he indeed equipped to lead this fight? When he eventually picked up the pen, a thought surfaced amid the fog. He had always found strength in stories. Even as a child, listening to his grandmother recount tales of survival and resilience had ignited a fire in him. Now, those stories became a lifeline. Jack began to write, letting the ink flow unrestrained. What if they told their experiences using narratives? Personal accounts could resonate more than statistics or demands on paper. He scribbled down the essence of each parent's story in fragmented notes: Sarah's heart-wrenching tale of her daughter's day of tears, the look in Mark's eyes as he recounted his son shutting down, Olivia's struggle just to navigate the school's indifferent bureaucracy. But as Jack assembled these fragments, a deeper question crept in: what about his story? Had he ever truly shared his vulnerabilities? The thought sent a jolt of realization through him. His fight wasn't just about the collective struggle, it was also about his role as Jake's father and his past battles with feeling invisible in a society that often overlooked the fragility of parenthood. With renewed vigor, Jack began to weave words together, transforming his story into a central narrative. He didn't shy away from his mistakes or fears, instead, he laid them bare. Jack wrote about the nights spent wondering if he was giving Jake enough, about the self-doubt that gnawed at him each day. He detailed their shared moments of vulnerability, showcasing the bond that strengthened rather than weakened through adversity. Glancing at the pile of notes, he felt hope surge. Each story felt like bricks stacking towards a foundation, solidifying a burgeoning structure for their argument, a shared narrative against the apathy from the administration. Yet even as he felt a sense of clarity, another wave of concern crashed over him. How would Jake respond if he became the focal point of this struggle? Would he feel burdened by his father's pursuit? The thought was unsettling, resulting in a conflict within Jack. Was he surpassing the line between advocacy and obsession, dragging his child into a fight not of his own making? He stood up abruptly, pacing around the cramped space, the weight of his decisions hanging heavily in the air. The confrontation with the school board loomed ahead and called for calm decisiveness. Just as he decided to take a moment to gather himself, his phone buzzed insistently. Looking down, he saw Jake's name flash on the screen. Jack hesitated, knowing that every decision made could echo in their lives moving forward. His fingers hovered over the screen, caught in a moment that would either fortify their bond or fracture it further. What would he say? Would this be a moment of connection or division? As he took a deep breath, the last remnants of his uncertainty pushed him to act. He answered the call. "Hey, buddy, how's it going?" The moment felt charged, a crossroads of his commitment to the fight and the precious relationship with his son resting in the balance. Would Jack's revelation of his own vulnerabilities resonate deeply or create a rift he could never mend? The next chapter in his life was about to be written, one in which he would need to confront the ultimate test of his resolve. "Hey, buddy, how's it going?" Jack's voice strained under the weight of his own uncertainties, but he hoped to mask his turmoil with the warmth of paternal affection. "Dad, I'm okay. Just finishing up homework," Jake replied, each word cautiously chosen, a shield against further inquiry. Jack noticed the hesitance in his son's voice, reflecting the barriers they both had built over the past weeks. "That's good to hear. Do you want to talk?" Jack ventured, his heart racing at the thought of peeling back the layers. He could sense Jake's guarded demeanor shifting, an instinct born from their recent struggles, as if fear and embarrassment hung in the air. A pause stretched between them like an unplumbed chasm. "About what?" Jake finally asked, sounding more defensive than curious. Jack realized that in his pursuit to fight the school system, he had unintentionally alienated the one person whose approval and understanding mattered most. "About everything. I'm just trying to make sense of things, you know. With school and everything going on there," he began, choosing his words carefully, aware of how sensitive the topic had become. He feared causing Jake more anxiety, yet the conversation felt inevitable. "Things are fine, Dad," Jake replied, a statement laced with finality. Jack could feel the distance stretching, fragile but palpable. How could he bridge the gap? Their conversations used to flow effortlessly, now, they felt like a hesitant dance around emotional landmines. "Right," Jack said, frustration bubbling beneath his calm. He knew hiding from reality wouldn't help. "It's just I've been thinking a lot about how to advocate better for you and kids like you. You know I'm trying to make things better, right?" His voice trembled as he braved his own vulnerability, hoping this raw honesty would resonate with Jake. "Yeah, but it's hard to talk about, Dad," Jake said, softer now, an invitation laced within. "I mean, I get it, things aren't always easy. But I don't want to be the reason for your stress." Jack felt a knot in his chest loosen just enough to allow a breath of relief to slip through. "You're not. I guess I'm just scared. Scared of failing you and everyone else. Sometimes I feel lost in all this." The admission felt both liberating and terrifying. Would Jake see him as weak, or would this moment draw them closer together? "I think you're doing a good job," Jake said, and Jack could almost hear him fighting against a wave of teenage reticence. "It's just I don't want you to lose yourself in all of this, you know? You have to take care of you too." Jack's heart swelled and sank simultaneously. He felt a new sense of resolve, but beneath that was an agonizing truth. He had been so focused on advocating for Jake and fighting for what was right that he often neglected his own needs. Jake was right, his fortitude mustn't come at the cost of his well-being. The realization struck him like a lightning bolt. Being a good father meant maintaining his own emotional health, too. "Thanks for saying that. It helps, even if I didn't know how to ask," Jack said. "I appreciate your honesty. Please know you can share what you really feel, anytime." "Okay," Jake replied, hesitance retreating further. "Just don't push too hard, all right?" Jack nodded, instinctively, as if Jake could see him. "Got it. I'll try to be more mindful. And if you ever need to talk about what's going on at school, I'm here to listen, no pressure at all." "I'll think about it," Jake said, and they settled into an easier rhythm. Their conversation unfolded, layered with future tensions, but Jack breathed easier knowing they were slowly carving back some lost ground. After the call ended, Jack sat in silence, allowing the wave of introspection to wash over him. He had opened a door to his own vulnerability, wanting Jake to feel safe enough to do the same. Yet he sensed a thicker fog settling over him. The confrontation with the school board was looming, and despite the emotional exchange, the pressure to deliver echoed louder than ever. The words he had written floated in his mind, a kaleidoscope of empathy and expectation. Would these encapsulated stories be a reflection of his growth or a culmination of his fears? Jack found himself pacing again, grappling with his role as both a parent and an advocate. Would revealing his vulnerabilities make him stronger, or would it expose a chink in his armor? And as he prepared for the journey ahead, the question lingered: how would he balance the roles without losing himself in the process? The confrontation approached like a storm brewing on the horizon, and Jack was left questioning if he had truly harnessed his own strength before stepping into the fray. He picked up the pen again, eyes darting to the notes spread across the table. Perhaps the real story, his story, was just beginning. As the tension of the upcoming confrontation crept into Jack's consciousness, it ignited something deep within him. He leaned over his notes, the pages filled with statistics, anecdotes, and the personal stories of those affected. Each line served as a reminder of why he had taken on this daunting task, to create a change for Jake and children like him. There was a flicker of determination sparking amidst the anxiety. The fear still loomed, but Jack decided to channel it into preparation rather than avoidance. He envisioned the school board members stony-faced, entrenched in their bureaucratic norms. What if they dismissed him? What if they mocked the very issues he sought to address? The stakes weren't merely institutional, they intertwined with his role as a father. Failure would mean not just disappointment, but potentially leaving Jake to navigate those challenges alone. Jack stood, the urge to pace once again overwhelming. It was an old habit, but this time, he needed a tactical walk, a strategy for what lay ahead. He imagined presenting the stories he had gathered, focused on highlighting the emotional truths rather than the clinical data that often drowned out personal narratives. Yet, could he wash away his own trepidation and deliver a heartfelt recounting when he faced the board? In that moment of deliberation, he became acutely aware of the parallels between his fear and Jake's trepidation about revealing his feelings. How often had he, in his quest to advocate for Jake, ignored the rawness of his own experience? If he wanted to inspire change, he had to be genuine not just in sharing others' stories but by exposing his own vulnerabilities, too. The evening deepened, shadows draping over the room, and Jack found himself reflecting. He recalled Jake's words, "Don't lose yourself in all of this." It wasn't just about Jake's struggles, it was also about Jack's identity, his integrity as a father and advocate. He had to strike a balance, embracing his role while ensuring that he remained whole. Determined, he decided to modify his approach. Instead of a rehearsed presentation, he would create a dialogue. The board needed to understand his passion, to see the man behind the statistics. With each step, he fashioned his resolve like armor. The stories couldn't just exist on paper, they needed to breathe through his voice, painted vividly by the depth of emotion he felt. What if the board could feel the urgency? What if he could illuminate the real-life implications of systemic shortcomings? He grasped the pen tightly, channeling not just a series of points, but the essence of his journey, the struggles, failures, joys, and profound love he felt for Jake. This wasn't merely a battle for education reform, it was a fight for the future of children who deserved better, children like his son who looked to him as their unwavering champion. The rush of adrenaline coursed through him. He scribbled down phrases that resonated, aiming to transcend mere words and evoke recognition. This wasn't about winning arguments or besting opinions, it was about crafting a heartfelt appeal that might transform indifference into empathy. With a final flourish, he paused to absorb how he envisioned the confrontation playing out. He could see it clearly, he would stand before the board a figure of resolve and vulnerability, unafraid to confront them with his truth. But as he pieced it all together, a sharp realization hit him, he couldn't unearth this personal resolve alone. He needed Jake beside him, grounded in their shared commitment. Maybe introducing his son to this process would create a collaborative strength that neither of them had anticipated. Jack swiftly turned his thoughts to figuring out how to include Jake in this pivotal moment, eager for their storytelling to intertwine. After all, this wasn't just Jack's mission, this was a journey for both father and son, grappling with fears, yet striving together for a greater purpose. As he dialed Jake's number, a new knot of anxiety formed in his stomach. What if he asked too much of him? What if Jake wasn't ready? But as he hit call, determination surged once more. Either way, the conversation would be necessary. The phone rang, and anticipation charged the air. Would this be the moment they both needed to confront their fears together? "Hey, Dad," Jake answered, and with that simple greeting, the world felt a little steadier for Jack. "Hey, Jake," Jack said, taking a deep breath. "Listen, I've been thinking about the school board meeting. I want to include you in it." His pulse quickened as he waited for a response. "Me? Why?" Jake's voice revealed a mix of surprise and trepidation. "Because you're at the heart of this issue," Jack replied, carefully choosing his words. "Your experiences, what you've gone through, it's important. I want them to hear from you. Together, we can show them what this really means." There was a long pause, and Jack could almost hear Jake wrestling with his thoughts on the other end. "Do you really think they'll listen?" Jack felt a surge of determination, bolstered by memories of his grandfather's bravery. "Yes, I do. If we share our truth, they won't be able to ignore us. This is our chance to stand up for each other and for every kid who feels like they have to suffer alone." "I guess I just don't want to make it worse, Dad," Jake murmured. Jack knew that fear well, he had battled it so long himself. But the prospect of sharing their story together felt like a transformative leap. "That's what we're here for, to change things for the better. Remember how we talked about courage? This is our moment to show it, to fight for what's right. And I promise you, you won't have to do this alone. I'll be right there with you." Slowly, the weight of Jake's hesitation began to shift. Jack sensed it, a subtle opening of confidence mixed with the ever-present youthfulness of his son. "All right, I'll do it, but only if you promise not to freak out if I get nervous. Jack chuckled lightly, instantly his anxiety dissipating. Deal. We'll figure it out together. I'm proud of you, buddy. Okay, Jake said, and Jack could hear his resolve blossoming through the connection. As the conversation continued, Jack guided Jake through the ideas he had been embodying. He framed the meeting not just as a confrontation, but as an opportunity for both of them to articulate their journey. They practiced how Jake could share his experiences, ensuring he felt both heard and supported. With each shared moment, Jack felt a profound connection solidifying. Together, they were crafting a shared narrative, one heartened by courage, vulnerability, and unity. As they strategized, Jack experienced a transformation. The knots in his stomach gave way to newfound confidence. It was like flicking a switch, illuminating the strength that lay within their bond. When the day of the school board meeting arrived, the air crackled with tension and anticipation. Jack stood in front of the courthouse, taking a deep breath against the chilly wind. He felt Jake next to him, his shoulder brushing against his father's in an act of solidarity that spoke volumes. The moment felt monumental, a culmination of all their struggles. Ready? Jack asked, locking eyes with his son. Yeah. Ready as I'll ever be, Jake replied, an earnest determination painting his face. As they entered the building, Jack's heart raced, yet he held on to the pool of strength forged from their shared commitment. The boardroom buzzed with murmurs, a sea of professionals who embodied the very system they had aimed to challenge. Still, nothing terrified Jack more than the thought of failure to protect his son, to advocate for the voiceless, to make a difference. In that moment of vulnerability, Jack realized the importance of their unified front. They were more than just individuals fighting a fight, they were allies, champions of each other's truth. The chairs in the boardroom faced them like an audience expecting a performance, and as they stood before those figures of authority, Jack swallowed hard. Thank you for allowing us to speak today, he began, voice steady. We're here not just as a father and son, but as representatives of hope for every child struggling within a system that often overlooks their pain. Jack looked back at Jake, who nodded in affirmation, their eyes communicating a depth of understanding. With shared intent, they poured their heart into their narrative-coupled stories of resilience and struggle, realities drenched in vulnerability, illuminating the depth of their experiences. Jake spoke, each word a testament to his experiences in school, the fear, the ridicule, the struggle not just to survive, but to thrive amidst indifference, his voice shaped by the unwavering support of his father. While the board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, it was clarity, authenticity, and heart that moved them, a poignant reminder of the profound impact bullying can have on a child's life. After their testimonies, silence hung densely in the air, and something shifted palpably. Where before there was a wall of disinterest, newfound awareness burgeoned within the room. For the first time, Jack felt that the judge's mockery had transformed not just into resilience, but into undeniable power. Thank you, one board member finally spoke, breaking the spell. We hear you. This is a conversation we need to continue. As Jack and Jake left the room, he felt lighter, a sense of accomplishment blooming like a flower through cracks in solid stone. They had faced their fears together and emerged victorious. Later, as they walked side by side, Jack realized this was not just a personal victory. Together, they had forged a path of transformation, one that shattered silence and empowered voices that cried out for change. He glanced at Jake, now forged anew through experience, and marveled at their mutual growth. The journey toward justice was only just beginning, but Jack felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had reclaimed his dignity and embraced vulnerability. More importantly, he stood as a pillar of strength for Jake, demonstrating the power that honesty and courage could wield. The cycle of shame had broken, and Jack Tanner, a veteran once mocked for his medals, had emerged triumphant, not just as a father, but as an advocate ready to champion change for his son and for all families struggling under the weight of indifference. This was the moment of transformation, one where both he and Jake understood their shared journey and the strength that resided within. Now, it is your turn to be part of these incredible stories of personal overcoming. You need to subscribe now to the channel, don't wait even one more second. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure these stories reach others who need to hear them. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending below, and don't forget to share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support is vital, and only true fans of personal growth know the importance of taking action.